Hey, welcome to Tank Talk. I'm your host, Bob Tankard, and this evening's guest is Senator Julian Cyr for the Cape and Islands. Julian, welcome to Tank Talk. I know you've been busy.
Dr. Tankard.
I know that you've been running, but I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
How's your first year been?
It's been awesome. I think I've been able to get more things done than I thought. I think I have in the Senate. So the Senate's this pretty special body. You're one of 40 members representing communities all across the Commonwealth. And we've got this pretty new model of shared leadership, shared responsibility. And so it means that traditionally in a legislature, it's you're kind of like herding cats. So there's often a really like sort of top-down leadership structure. And in the Senate, that's really been flattened out. And so rank and file members and new members like me really get to have a disproportionate voice. And so I really feel like I've gotten to have more of a say than I thought I would have on Beacon Hill.
How do you work across the board? Across the aisle, with the representatives and the senators. I know that you and Dylan work close together.
We work really. I work really closely with all the representatives, and I think the other thing too. We're in such a partisan or a sort of toxic national moment, right, in our partisan politics. And what I've really loved, yes, we've got super majorities of Democrats in both chambers in Massachusetts, but in the region that I represent, most of the representatives who represent Cape Cod are actually Republicans. But 9 out of 10 of the issues that I'm working on for my communities and they're working on, it's not partisan things. And so that's been really refreshing and nice. That it's about the work. And then, you really gotta, sometimes there's some tension between what the Senate wants to do and the House wants to do. But we're set up to be, it's a bicameral legislature, so we've got to work together. Otherwise, we're not going to get anything to the governor's desk and you're not going to get things done. Good.
Listen, the Senate passed a bill to reform the state criminal justice system.
Yes.
Okay, explain that.
So criminal justice reform is something that we have been trying to do in Massachusetts for quite a long time.
Okay.
A lot of other states have, actually been ahead of us. Actually, a lot of red states have been ahead of us in really looking at moving away from mandatory minimums for nonviolent crimes.
Okay.
And I think
you mean that means that you're putting people in jail for minor things.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or saying that there is a mandatory minimum sentence for this crime or that crime.
Okay.
And really what I think we've seen and what research really shows is that is really disproportionately incarcerated people, kept people in jail longer, and has not really had a rehabilitative focus. And so the Senate took up a comprehensive bill. The House actually did so as well, and actually came out with something that was far more progressive than we thought. But I think as well, the opioid epidemic in particular, I think has reframed how people look at how drugs have an impact in our communities, right? And that often for lower level drug offenders, that really what they need is treatment and rehabilitation, not just to be locked up. And so that's what we sought to do. But and a lot of other issues, really important bail reform. That folks were, if you're unable to pay the $1,500 for bail for a pretty minor crime, you're having to spend, time in jail. Really, that's something that's antiquated,
and
not fair.
You probably have to look at that if the person was going to. If a person's got a bail of $1,500, they can't afford it. You have to look at the person. Are they going to flee or stay? If I don't put them in jail, will they be willing to come back? Or are they going to come back to,
Well, exactly, Dr.
Or, it'd be better for them to put a bracelet on their ankle to say, okay, you got to come back here, and we'll know exactly where you are, no matter what. But you're going to come back, and we're not going to put you in jail.
Yeah, and so. This is exactly the kind of conversation that's prompted this policy change. And the thought really is that, well, if judges or prosecutors are concerned about flight, then that should be the reason why someone is held, not using bail as that tool. And a whole host of other reforms. I think at the beginning of the session, I wasn't sort of sure where we'd come out on it. And both the Senate and the House has passed something that has been long overdue. We're in conference committee, so we're negotiating the details. But I expect that we'll have something on the governor's desk soon.
You mentioned something on the opiate situation. Every day you're seeing on the news that people are dying. You know what I mean? It's not like they used to smoke marijuana, or these people are dying. They can take one shot of that fentanyl, whatever they call it, and they're dead. And now everybody is trying to be a preventative. Give them the needle to bring them back. What can we do? It's like the system. There's been education around drugs for years. Even when I was in the school system way back 100 years ago, we've had all types of training and notifications and whatnot, and trying to alert people. And yet, individuals still partake. And you say, what is it about that they get involved in? What is it? And now, do we need to start putting more places for people to get healed? How's that? How are you guys looking at that?
So one part of that really is that the majority of people who have become addicted through opioids is actually initially through the prescription of opioids to them by healthcare providers.
Okay.
And so actually we've seen it's the sort of the quintessential story of the young athlete who has an injury, is prescribed an inordinate amount of OxyContin, and they end up becoming addicted to that, and the shift and the transition into from prescription, from the pills to shooting up and heroin and whatnot is often from a price point perspective. And so we've in Massachusetts tried to do, I think been successful in trying to stem the overprescribing of opioids. And several years ago the legislature passed and the governor signed a bill that really worked to sort of reduce the prescribing of opioids. What we haven't done though here is we haven't created a continuum of care for folks. So what we know, if you are someone who is struggling with any addiction, but with opiate addiction, recovery is a multi-year process, 6, 7, 8, 9 years.
It is.
Currently, we require insurance companies to provide 14 days of treatment. So what happens on the 15th day?
Right.
And so what you're seeing is sort of a cycling of folks who, are struggling with a very significant disease, who are only getting a certain amount of treatment. We would never say, okay, we're treating you for heart disease, and we're going to give you 90 days of a statin or something like that.
Right.
But after that, you're kind of cut off. And that's really problematic, and I think it's actually making the problem, not that it's making the problem worse, but I think it's contributing to folks who are getting treatment, then who are relapsing.
But
that's
what are you
actually
looking
part of the
financially
recovery.
to try to provide those services? You're probably looking at, places, hospitals.
Yes.
You're looking at institutions, centers where people can go to get that, and that means manpower. That means insurance. That means everything else, and that's upping the ante now. The dollars, and it's all about dollars. We all know, it's all about the dollar. You know what I mean? And a funny thing happened. You're talking about addiction. I had my knee replaced 2 years ago, and I've had gentlemen, people that I know that have had the same thing, and they know the prescribed drug. There was the OxyContin or whatever it was, and I said to myself before I went in, I said, I've been an athlete in my early days. I know what pain is. I played with pain and went through pain. And I know that pain subsides after a period of time, over a period of time. So after the surgery was over, they gave me a thing of pills. And I looked at the pills and I said, I said, let me see if I can get through this by using Tylenol.
Yeah.
My wife said, you're crazy, the pain. I said, listen, I said, every day that pain is going to subside.
Yep.
I said, so if I can use this Tylenol and get through physical therapy and everything else, don't you know, Senator, it worked.
It worked.
I just took the pill. I didn't use the pills. I gave my wife took them someplace and gave them to the police or whatever.
But there are some things that we can do, and actually we need to do right here on island. So one intervention that's really helpful for people is medically assisted treatment, particularly Suboxone and Vivitrol, which are newer drugs. Currently on island, there's no provider that you can use insurance to go to be involved in the Suboxone program. I was meeting with the new CEO at Vineyard Hospital yesterday, and we were talking about this, right? How do we make sure that we get medically assisted treatment for islanders? And part of that is not just the medication. Exactly, you have to go to Falmouth. Not just medication, but the suite of services and care and support for folks. So we've got a long way to go on this. I think the other piece in responding to the opioid epidemic is that I think we've really got to look at out-of-the-box solutions. I think the last time, and I'm a public health guy, I worked in public health prior to this, and so this is sort of the lens I look at things. The last time we were dealing with an epidemic like this, akin to this, was the HIV/AIDS epidemic. And some of the most effective interventions that reduced infections and that kept people alive were things that were kind of out of the box, that were made kind of people a little uncomfortable. Needle exchange is an example of that, condom distribution. Those actually turned out in sort of saving lives. And so I think what we're trying to figure out, and we're going to be taking up a bill this session on this, is, all right, what are those out-of-the-box ideas, interventions? How do we really throw the kitchen sink at this epidemic, because it is so significant, and we know that that maybe, just maybe, those sort of interventions are going to help save lives, and that's what is important.
One of the other things that you've done, we have, they call it the country club down there in Nagertown, but our jail on here,
I've toured your jail several times.
Right.
It's to call it inadequate or is
you put 1.7
dilapidated. It's probably more.
Right. $1.7 million have been appropriated by the Senate Capital Bond Bill to renovate the jail, which needs to be. I have a nephew, 2 nephews, and a bunch of my ex-students that work down there, and they said the place is deplorable. It's just crazy. Thank you, first of all.
You're welcome.
Thank you for doing that, and I know they thank you. Here's your question. Was it anything in the discussion that you had with, Bob down there, the new sheriff, and some of the other people about moving that to another location? Was that in the discussion, or was it, let's just keep it here and renovate it?
So first of all, Dukes County needs to have, and all people need to have those basic safety standards for lockups and for jails across the Commonwealth. I used to work with the Department of Public Health. We did these inspections. I participated in them. This facility is not meeting that. The capital bond bill provides $1.75 million just for them to do some basic safety upgrades that are long overdue. But I think you're right. I think there really should be a conversation. You look at, for Dukes County, for this island, you look at an inadequate jail, a courthouse that's sort of bursting at the seams, and it has, certainly is not the most ideal environment.
When that was built, it wasn't built for 20,000 people on the Vineyard, and
it's a beautiful building. So my kind of question to you folks has been, to Islanders, I've asked the question, should we be having a conversation about, do we need a new sort of jail, courthouse, something complex? To do that would require significant state support, and it takes a number of years to do that. It's almost a decade-long process.
Really?
So it's a sizable chunk of money. You'd probably be talking about millions of dollars. Where would you put it? Looking for that what state-owned land do we have? So that's certainly something I'm interested in hearing more feedback from all Islanders. I hear time and again about how inadequate the court is. I mean, space-wise. I've been in the jail. I've toured this facility. I can see how inadequate it is there.
Well, it's inadequate. Here you're saying.
Well, not even inadequate. It's just woefully out of date.
It's small, out of date. When that building was built, it probably was, when I moved to the Vineyard when I was 15 years old in 1961. It was only 4,000 or 5,000 people here. So you figured that courthouse was able to handle that. The jail was able to handle that. Now you got 20,000 plus on a year-round basis, plus 120 on every given day in the summertime. So the individuals that go through the courthouse or the jail, whatever it is, and from time to time, I know for a fact that certain prisoners from off island were brought here. For whatever reasons, safety reasons, whatever. So you're right that it is outdated. It is. It needs to be thought of, and it might be something to put on a docket, and maybe 10 years from now, the funds would be there. My thing would be, we have a ton of state forests here, and you talk about land. I was thinking, would that be a possibility if the Senate and the House designated a piece of that state forest land for the jail, because since it's a state thing, could they do that?
That certainly would be kind of part of the conversation. I mean, I'd want to, I'd want to first ask the state, look at what's all the land that we own here. And it's more than just the state forest,
Right.
right? There's a number of the roads are owned by the state and maintained by the state. But I think certainly we got to find, if you do that, you got to find a place to do it.
Right.
And I think that's one of the considerations.
Right.
I mean, I know there's a lot of talk I hear about, oh, well, could we use the state forest for this and for that? And there's a part of it that's important for conservation.
Right.
But I think having a courthouse, jail, a complex for this, that'd be part of the conversation.
It would probably be great. Well, we want to thank you for. I know those guys down at the jail are going to thank you for some renovations. Any improvement.
One, it's not, and yes for them, but also for islanders who, whether you're just being held, overnight, because the jail also does do the holdings for all the police departments around here, or you're someone who's spending longer time there.
Exactly.
Both the people that work there and the people that are involved in our criminal justice system here, they deserve to have. They deserve to be in a facility that is not going to make them sick, that it's going to be safe. God forbid if there was ever an accident or a fire in that facility. So this is a real disservice and a real liability for the Commonwealth, and we've got to look at it.
Great. Listen, you and Representative Fernandez have been working on securing state funds for the medical transportation on the island and the fishing, shellfish propagation.
So actually, we're over
now,
here.
I know the shellfish was one of both of you talked extensively about.
Yeah, but I worked extensively on this before.
Way back when you were
especially with the Catema closures
right.
that we had with the submergence of this Vibrio parahemolyticus bacteria, and the good news on that is that that's a much more stable situation than it was a few years ago. Dylan and I both worked in the budget to secure funding for shellfish propagation, so for each of the towns and the communities here, to further aquaculture and shellfish. That's important, yes, for recreation. It's also important for the health and quality of our embayments. A lot of these embayments are impaired from nitrogen from our septic systems. Aquaculture and shellfish, especially oysters, are really good at cleaning out that nitrogen. So $58,000 there. And then off-island transportation, both for Martha's Vineyard and for Nantucket, for people who need to get off-island for care. This is a big concern. Actually, I was talking yesterday with a hospital CEO, about the challenges that they have in getting patients when someone's not. They don't need to be airlift, right? It's not that severe. Getting someone off-island and what's involved in that and the cost of that, especially the town of Oak Bluffs, which is a lot of the EMS transports. So we're here to make some announcements about that, and to bottom line, we've just been working to make sure that we're able to bring some state resources for island concerns.
When you talk about the shellfish industry, there's still a lot of individuals that rely on scalloping for the season. I know Edgartown and Up Island. Their crops have been good, and in Vineyard Haven, our shellfish warden, she's done an outstanding job. I can't say enough about her. I go and I love it. I just love being out there on the ocean. But I go and do it my 2 or 3 times, and I noticed that we had about 10, 15 commercial guys, and they were out there until the weather got real cold. You know what I mean? But I can't help to think. You mentioned something about the nitrogen in the soil, and I can remember her saying something about eelgrass. We needed eelgrass to be able to for the scallops to latch onto or whatnot. But the nitrogen from the different houses are preventing that or depleting that.
Well, it creates an environment where there isn't enough oxygen in the water, and so it makes it difficult for the eelgrass to grow. Actually, we've been spending a lot of time talking about and thinking about how do we help the communities here on island and across the region that I represent really respond to the real environmental degradation that we see in our embayments and also in our freshwater ponds. That manifests actually through phosphorus. And so wastewater has just become a huge issue. And on Cape Cod, the 15 towns on Cape Cod actually were sued by an environmental group because of the degradation of their embayments. There's been a settlement, but the towns on the Cape, Cape Cod has a $4 billion wastewater problem. We have hundreds of millions of dollars in wastewater needs here on island, especially in the down island towns. And so,
how do we correct that?
Well, some of it is pipes and pumps and sewering. Some of it is alternative technologies like aquaculture. But what you need is money. These are expensive, big projects. And so what I've been focused on with the whole Cape delegation, Dylan's been working on this, Representative Sarah Peake from Provincetown's really been a lead on this, is thinking about, all right, how do we get more state money to help our communities? Our communities did not invest, for better or worse, when there was a lot of federal monies for wastewater, building these systems in the 70s and 80s. And so we're working, actually I'm on island in part, to talk to town leaders and select board members and town managers about the idea of creating a Cape Cod and Islands Water Protection Trust that would allow us to funnel resources from the state, potentially federal resources as well, and so that the towns could sort of pool those resources to be able to borrow, basically be able to borrow to invest in these projects.
Let me ask you something. You talk about sewerage. Now, I can remember years ago that none of the island had sewage, and then Edgartown downtown was in such dire straits because of the rising in tide and the restaurants over there. So they went to sewage first. They're the first ones to went sewage all through downtown. So to take care of that sewage and shipped up to the plant. The next one to come in was Vineyard Haven. Vineyard Haven was next because we had the same problem in our downtown area because we were so close to the water, trying to eliminate any sewerage in that area and get it pumped out. Then Oak Bluffs decided to do the same thing. But how far from that area back does one need to go to prevent pollution or anything, or to be effective? Like from downtown Vineyard Haven, as they say, 5 corners, do you have to go up by the Tisbury School? Is that far enough, or you need to go further? In Oak Bluffs, they ran into pressure problems in Oak Bluffs, especially in the wintertime. They didn't have enough pressure. In the summertime, they do because you have the campgrounds and everything else.
Well, that's the whole challenge, right? We have to build wastewater systems not to accommodate the 20,000 people who live here, the 200,000 people who live on Cape Cod year round.
Right.
But it's for that seasonal population, and when it really swells, and so it really increases the cost of what we have to do. I'm not sort of a groundwater, wastewater sort of expert, so I don't exactly know how far you need to go, and that's really up to the towns to look at. What I'm trying to do is try to come up with a tool where we can bring some state support for the town. So, Tisbury does have some significant projected costs as it relates to sewering that's probably going to need to happen. If you all have to do that on your own with no state support, that is going to be paid through property taxes or betterments, and you're talking about potentially a doubling of those, which for folks who are trying to hang on and make it here, the twin connected issue to this is housing and housing affordability. And so, if folks had to pay for that just out of pocket completely, you make it really hard for them to be able to stay.
Well, here's the thing. When you talk about housing, that was my next question to you. We have a terrible affordable housing on the Vineyard. When they say affordable housing, $400,000, $375, that's really not affordable compared to what your salary is, right? And just right now, housing by itself, just so somebody can not even buy a house, just to have a place to stay. I was told that we have probably between 125 and 160 people in the wintertime that are basically homeless on the Vineyard. And I'm saying to myself, what could we possibly do? All the houses that used to be available years ago are now not available because people have taken them. And then they're out by June 15th because other people rent them or whatever. The people come back for vacations or for the vacation for the summer. What can we do? And I don't know if they're having the same problem on the Cape. They've got to be having.
We are absolutely having the same problem on the Cape, and we're having the same problem on Nantucket. In my district, the Cape and Islands district, sort of the extremities of the district, have the most housing crisis. So here on island, Nantucket, and then the Outer Cape, where I'm from, in Provincetown, Truro, and Wellfleet, the median home price in my hometown of Truro is $800,000.
Ooh.
Only Chilmark has more expensive property in the Commonwealth than Nantucket. And really, this is this is such a big challenge, right? If we don't find a way for folks to live in our communities, I don't know how these places subsist and survive.
You've been on the boat. I know you've been. Well, you were on the boat this morning with all the workers coming over. But you know one thing?
Yep.
A lot of those workers were island kids that were homegrown, that have chose to move off island because it was cheaper for them to go there and they could find housing and they come out here to work.
Well, and the only young folks who can be here, and I find this in my neck of the woods, all of my peers, right, we grew up there and we've come home and we're able to be there because our families have a foothold there, right? Your family owns a house or you got something, you make it work, right? And that's not a way to have a sustainable community. So a few things. At the state level, I've really been pushing for us to take up a zoning reform and housing production bill. Massachusetts is ranked 49th in the nation when it comes to our zoning. It's pretty antiquated here. I think we need to really incentivize and push for mixed development. And I know there's been talk about this. There's talk in OB of having more incentives to have folks live on top of sort of the stores and that sort of thing. So we really need zoning reform and housing production at the state level. We also need more programs. Most of the state and federal support is for capital A affordable housing. So if you make below 80% or less of area median income, but often that's 30% of area median income. Those folks, we have so few of those folks in our community who are left at that level because they've been pushed out. And so what we need in addition to capital A affordable housing is we need diverse price point housing, right? We need supports for people who are making 120, 150, almost 200% of area median income. Otherwise, they're just rent burden. You're paying more than 40, 50% of your income on housing. So we need to look at that. The wastewater piece, I think, is tied to this. So, enabling towns to expand, in the case of the islands here, expand sewers, or on the Cape where we only have 4 towns on the Cape that have any sewer systems, to be able to just build a sewer, that's going to enable more development in sort of our existing dense downtowns, right? You can't build Vineyard Haven or Edgartown or Chatham or Provincetown, these sort of quintessential New England villages. You can't build them under existing zoning, and you can't do it without wastewater. So that's that piece to it. And then here on island, there's a real conversation about creating a housing trust or some sort of mechanism sort of that mirrors or is akin to the land bank, which has been very successful. And so actually, you may recall last year at that town meeting, 5 of the 6 island towns voted that they want to participate in some sort of housing bank, and now we've got to figure out what that would look like. We'd need state authorization to do that. So Representative Fernandez and I are trying to pull together and host a forum with all sorts of community leaders and stakeholders and folks on every side of this issue, and just say, hey, all right, there's a desire for us to do something, but what does that look like? And we need your help to figure out what that would be.
Well, listen, this has been great. We get here and we begin to talk and we can use about 5 hours, but our time has run out. I enjoy you coming. Call again anytime.
I will, Dr. Tankard.
And listen.
Yeah.
Are you enjoying yourself, sir?
I am so enjoying myself, especially when I get to be here on island.
Hey, thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Tankard.
Hey, and thank you for tuning in to Tank Talk. Until next time, this is your host, Bob Tankard, saying good evening.